As Iraq turns off the flow of oil. England have it all to play for. It's the last day of the Pakistan test.
And on Reporting Scotland in 30 minutes, Tory leaders fire a warning that internal squabbling now will damage their election chances. And proposals for a list of adults who won't be allowed to work with children.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC's News at 1 o'clock. Just 3 days to go now, and Tony Blair has been reaching out to disaffected Tory voters. He said decent, patriotic, one-nation Conservatives should now support Labour. William Hague, on the other hand, is already talking about what he'd do in his first 2 weeks in Downing Street. But in the last half hour, there's been some bad news for the Tories. Their former Treasury Minister, Anthony Nelson, has defected to Labour. As ever, John Sopel is here with the details. John.
George, thank you very much. Well, the finishing line is in sight. And if you'd been to Ladbrokes to bet on a Labour victory in this election, you can now already go and collect your winnings. They're not waiting for Thursday, they're already paying out. And the latest polls suggest nothing much is changing. Meanwhile, at the Tories' press conference, William Hague outlined what he'd be doing in his first week as Prime Minister. So what's going on? Well, the Tory leader told assembled journalists that on Friday you'd be surprised and I'll be busy. But the new Tory poster released to the press yesterday and unveiled today tells a different story. The emphasis is not so much on victory, but of taking the wind out of Tony Blair.
We're saying to people, do vote, and vote Conservative, because that is the way in which you can deliver to Labour a message about their failure.
At the Tory news conference, meanwhile, William Hague was doing his own take on the story of the creation. On the first day of being Prime Minister, he'd choose his cabinet, the second, junior ministers, the third, launch a public inquiry into foot and mouth, and on the fourth, save the pound. And so it went on.
On Friday, 15th of June, Francis Maud and I would travel to the EU summit in Gothenburg with a mandate to begin a crusade for genuine reform of the EU. And over the coming 4 days, we will spare no effort, hour or breath, so that on Friday, you will be surprised and we will be busy. Thank you very much.
But when Mr. Hague finally rested, there was a sense among the journalists this was not good.
If this Labour government is as bad as you say it is, isn't it a pretty bleak comment, either on your campaign or your leadership, that you are now having to appeal to the country not to give them a landslide?
There seems to be some confusion about the message you're trying to put over to the voters. Are you saying to them, don't allow Labour another landslide, or are you saying to them, you'll be surprised we're going to win on Thursday?
Well, we're saying vote Conservative.
It's wonderful to be back here in Harrow. Harlow. Harlow. It's lovely to be back here.
Tony Blair was in Harlow in Essex, though of course this was the phony Tony Blair, also known as Rory Bremner. The real Mr. Blair had more serious matters on his mind in a change of tack, making a direct appeal to disillusioned Tories.
Today I say to those decent and patriotic one-nation Conservatives, appalled at today's Conservative Party policies and strategy, I hope you too will support us.
And he dismissed talk that this election was already in the bag.
Can I just say something to you very, very bluntly indeed? Right? The election hasn't happened. Right? It's not for you to determine the result of the election before it's happened. The British people are the boss. They will determine this election, and I'm asking them to vote for what they believe in.
Hoping to benefit from the Tories' problems are the Liberal Democrats.
Well, I think that the Conservatives look as if they're in very big trouble indeed in this general election, which is an amazing thought, because if you cast your mind back 4 years when the Conservatives went down to such a massive defeat, everybody would have assumed that having lost so much, the only thing that could possibly happen would be that the Conservatives would win quite a lot back.
And if people aren't going back to the Tories, says Charles Kennedy, we have a welcome for you.
We need every positive Liberal Democrat vote that we can get in every constituency in the country, just like the other parties do for their political causes as well. We're not in some kind of
Charles Kennedy against what appears to be a Conservative backdrop. Well, the party's still insisting, officially at least, there's everything to play for. Not so according to Britain's biggest bookmaker. Ladbrokes is already paying out dividends to customers who've put their money on a Labour win, and they say they won't accept any more bets on a simple majority.
What we're saying is the market, who's going to win, is over for us. Nobody wants to back the Tory party, nobody really wants to back the Lib Dems, and we as bookmakers don't want to take any more bets on Labour.
Well, this lunchtime, some more bad news for the Tories, with the former Conservative MP for Chichester and Treasury Minister Anthony Nelson joining the Labour Party. He said, "I've been a Conservative all my life, but as the election approaches, it is clear that only Tony Blair offers the leadership and vision this country needs." Well, our political correspondent John Pienaar is at Westminster. John, obviously a serious blow for the Conservatives. How significant is it?
Well, on the day that the Labour Party and Tony Blair are trying to reach across the party frontier and appealing to those One Nation Conservatives, it's very useful to have someone like Tony Nelson crossing the line and joining the Labour camp. He wasn't one of the Premier League Tory politicians, always a junior minister in the Treasury, but you can see that someone with his pedigree, someone you would have thought of as a dyed-in-the-wool, true blue, archetypal Tory from central casting, coming over with something of a propaganda gain. And the reason for it, well, it's not too hard to see that. You look at Tony Nelson's track record. He's spoken up for Europe very strongly in the past, declared himself in favour of a single currency. Now he says Tony Blair's the only one to give the kind of leadership that he wants. That's useful for Labour, and I can well imagine just over the road at Central Office at Conservative headquarters, they're quietly cursing his name. OK,
John, at Westminster, many thanks. Well, while the parties have been rowing over landslide or no landslide, a separate debate has been raging about the way we'll all vote. More postal votes than ever before are likely to be cast at this election. But an investigation by Radio 4's Today programme has highlighted the potential for fraud. A BBC reporter got hold of these ballot papers after applying in the names of dead voters. So, could this sort of fraud make a difference? Well, Colchester in Essex is a very tight three-way marginals. The Liberal Democrats took it from the Tories in 1997 with a majority of just over 1,500. Our correspondent, Richard Bilton, is there. Richard.
John, yeah, as you say, this is a very tight three-way marginal. Just a couple of thousand votes separated the parties last time round. Now, in 97, 1,000 people wanted to vote through the post. This time round, that's risen to 6,000. So here, they're doing all they can to make sure that the system isn't abused.
The final preparations are being made. At Colchester Town Hall, the boxes and papers are just about ready. But in a constituency where so many votes are postal, around 5% of the total, they've spent time checking those who've applied for a postal vote. They say in every system of voting there is the threat of fraud, but they've done all they can.
I think with the system of postal votes, I suppose it does present the potential for that sort of thing to happen, but we're very confident that here we've put in place all the measures that we possibly can to ensure that sort of thing can't happen. We stamp out those sort of practices and ensure that we do get a good, fair result.
Once in the system, postal votes are kept away from the rest of the mail. It has been suggested that in some areas, postal ballots could make up as much as 1 in 5 of the total vote. That has led some political experts to say this election is different to all that's gone before.
One effect of postal voting on the election is that a lot of people vote early, and last-minute appeals to the voters are obviously not going to be effective for people who've already voted. The other problem with postal voting, and it is emerging as a problem, is fraud, which could take place on a massive scale and is much easier under a postal voting system than when people actually have to go to the polling place.
Some say there is simply not enough time before elections to carry out detailed and thorough checks. Though here in Colchester, like all constituencies, a review of those who voted through the post will be carried out after Thursday's poll.
Because you can actually apply for a postal vote just 6 working days before an election, and that makes the whole process very tight. Now, here in Colchester, they say they do closely monitor all postal applications, and if they subsequently find that somebody has been abusing the system, they would prosecute, and that's a potential 6-month jail sentence. Though in 97, that didn't happen here, and it didn't happen anywhere else. John.
OK, Rich, thanks very much indeed, and I'll be back later in the programme with a look at the issues affecting one family still deciding how to vote. And of course, no programme would be complete without our moment of the morning. George.
Indeed, thank you, John. Now the day's other news. In Nepal, one person has been killed in clashes with riot police. The country now has its third king in as many days. That came after the former crown prince, who many believe murdered his own family, died last night from the injuries he received after turning the gun on himself.
This is Nepal's new king, their third in almost as many days. His coronation was a hasty and secretive affair, with tight security and few witnesses. A few days ago, he was just a minor royal. Now he's pushed onto the throne by the mysterious murders of almost all the royal family. His journey to the palace is insecure as well as unexpected. This is a volatile country with violence never far from the surface. Not everyone here is applauding their new monarch. As the news spread, riots broke out across the city. Thousands of youths marched towards the palace, chanting anti-government slogans. Riot police went in hard, using tear gas and baton charges as they clashed with demonstrators. We've got a new king, but that's not good enough, said this man. We want the truth about who murdered the king and queen. Grief here is still raw. The late king was dearly loved. Many had been praying desperately that his son, the former crown prince, would survive. Their prayers weren't answered. It's been one drama after another here in the last few days, and grief and anger are running out of control. The most important task facing this newly crowned king will be to restore a sense of order. But restoring order might not be easy. Nepal is a tense mix of different ethnic groups dogged by militants and extremists. The monarchy used to be a unifying factor, but now it's in crisis, and these are suddenly anxious times. Jill McGivering, BBC News, Kathmandu.
And Jill McGivering is on the line now from the Nepalese capital, Kathmandu. Jill, this ought to be a time of mourning, and yet you've got the police shooting tear gas. The two things just don't seem to gel.
No, that's right. It has been a very tough response from the authorities. We had riot police in very quickly as soon as crowds started to gather, and the army deployed in strength. Now a curfew has been imposed across the city. I think emotions here are running very high, and I think it's partly the fact that the authorities are concerned about letting the situation getting any more out of control than it is already. That's partly why there's been such a determined and a forceful reaction.
Jill, you talked about anxious times. I mean, there has, of course, been some sort of insurgency in the last few years, haven't there?
That's right. Nepal has a number of armed, self-proclaimed Maoist groups here. They've been involved in a campaign of violence in the country for some years. They are opposed to the institution of monarchy per se. They're calling for a republic to be set up. And I think one of the fear is that these or other extremist groups might take advantage of this present turmoil for their own gains.
Jill, thank you very much. Here, a key witness in the Lord Archer perjury trial has begun giving evidence at the Old Bailey. Angela Pepiat was in charge of Lord Archer's appointments diary when he was the deputy chairman of the Conservative Party. It's alleged Lord Archer falsified diaries to provide an alibi after a newspaper claimed he'd slept with a prostitute. He denies the charges. Duncan Kennedy is now at the Old Bailey. Duncan, a crucial witness. What have we been hearing?
George, very much so. Let's just recap, though, on the events before this, just to put it all in context. What this trial is about a trial of 1987. Just as you were referring to there, Jeffrey Archer's attempts in 1987 to win his case against the Star newspaper, who accused him of cavorting with a prostitute. Now, crucial to that trial were Jeffrey Archer's whereabouts at the time, in order to establish whether he was with that prostitute or not. What we've had this morning in this trial is his secretary giving evidence, his secretary at the time, a woman called Angela Pepiat. Just in the past few moments, she's come to give evidence and talk about the specific moments surrounding those dates in question. And she's just told the court this: Jeffrey came to me with a blank sheet of paper and a diary and asked me to fill in the names on that bit of paper onto the blank diary. She goes on to say, obviously, I was extremely concerned about this request and couldn't understand why he asked me to do it. She goes on to say, however, the idea might have been suggested by Jeffrey Archer's counsels in order to protect the political sensitivity of other matters in the real diary. So the diary is at the centre of this case. Mr. Archer is accused of ordering his secretary, Mrs. Pepiat, to falsify entries in that diary. Jeffrey Archer himself denies that charge, and Mrs. Pepiat will continue to give evidence on this and other matters as this case proceeds this afternoon. George.
Duncan, thank you. Motorists are waiting to see if petrol prices go up after Iraq announced it was stopping virtually all its oil exports, adding to the pressure on world prices. Baghdad's decision is a protest against the United Nations policy of only allowing it to sell oil to buy food. Here's our business correspondent, Greg Wood.
Fuel protests around the country dwindled almost to nothing this morning. If headlines about petrol prices leaping because of Iraqi action were designed to arouse more protest, they failed. Today, Iraq did make good its threat to halt oil exports. The price of crude oil rose slightly as a result. But it's still well below levels seen last year. At the time of the fuel blockade last summer, the price of crude hit nearly $38 a barrel. Now, even with today's rise, it remains below $30. In any case, Saudi Arabia has pledged to make up any shortfall in oil supplies caused by Iraq, and its giant desert oil fields have more than enough spare capacity to do so.
I think that this oil will be replaced very quickly. It takes 6 weeks and more for crude oil to get from the Middle East to Western Europe in any case, and really we shouldn't see a big impact from Iraq's decision.
Iraq will dominate the meeting of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries in Vienna this week. OPEC says it'll make sure that demand is met and prices are stable. Higher crude oil prices do not automatically mean higher petrol prices for us. Other factors are at work, like the supply of fuel from refineries. Those supplies are picking up again after shortages earlier in the year, so there's little immediate upward pressure on prices. Greg Wood, BBC News.
And our economics reporter Jenny Scott is at a petrol station in Richmond in Surrey. We heard some arguments there, Jenny. What is your best guess about crude prices?
Well, we could well see an increase in oil prices. I mean, logic would suggest that if you suck 2 million barrels of oil a day out of the market, then you're going to see some upward pressure on prices. Just to put that into context, here in Britain, we use about 1.75 million barrels of oil a day, so it's quite a large chunk of the market. But having said that, as Greg pointed out, there are some exceptional circumstances at the moment which suggest that it mightn't be too bad. There's actually quite a lot of spare oil around at the moment, and in any case, the response from OPEC has actually been fairly calm. I spoke to an analyst earlier this morning who's in Vienna for this OPEC meeting, and he said the atmosphere there was really quite relaxed. And I think one reason for that is that there's big question marks as to how long Iraq can sustain this position. Selling oil is their only source of foreign income, so they're playing a pretty risky game of chicken here, and it's not altogether certain that they can hold out long enough to force prices up. So really a sense that, yes, we could have done without this, but it's just not a crisis at the moment.
Jenny, fairly quickly, what is the link then between crude prices and pump prices?
Well, I think the bottom line for motorists here in Britain is that short term we probably won't see much of an impact. Longer term we could see an increase in petrol prices, but probably not by that much. Ironically, one of the reasons is because we pay so much tax here on petrol in Britain. About 3/4 of the amount of the petrol price pump here is made up of taxes, which leaves only about 1/4 to fluctuate with oil prices. So bottom line, yes, we could see a small impact here at the petrol pump, but that's just it, only probably very small.
All right, Jenny, thank you very much. Peanut allergies in children may be linked to creams used to treat eczema. That's according to researchers who found that 9 out of 10 children with the allergy had first suffered from eczema. There's been a big increase in peanut allergies in recent years. 1 in 100 children now has the condition.
All 3 children in the Murphy family are allergic to peanuts. It's a problem doctors are becoming increasingly aware of. The latest research suggests 1 in 100 children has the allergy. That's far higher than previously thought. All 3 also have the skin condition eczema. In fact, 90% of children with peanut allergies have had eczema as a baby, and doctors think some skin products could be to blame.
It seems to be peanut oil containing creams and oils that are put on the eczema that may well be the thing that's triggered the peanut allergy.
The theory is the allergy starts because the eczema exposes immune cells to peanut oil in the cream. So Alison Murphy now makes sure the creams she uses don't contain peanut oil.
It seemed particularly ironic that the very children who should be avoiding nuts because of their allergic tendencies are being exposed from an early age via the creams that are supposed to be making them get better.
All of these creams can be used to treat eczema, and all of them contain peanut oil, also known as arachis oil. So if this research proves to be correct, they could all potentially cause a dangerous peanut allergy in children. The research comes out of the Children of the 90s project in Bristol, which is following 14,000 children born 9 years ago. The peanut allergy work isn't finished, but the dangers are already well known.
The mouth and neck may swell, go terribly red. It may then develop into abdominal cramps. The child may have breathing difficulties. They may collapse.
As well as the peanut allergy study, the Children of the 90s project has broken new ground in research into asthma, breastfeeding and aerosols. Daniel Sandford, BBC News, Bristol.
Cricket, and England still have a chance for victory in the second test at Old Trafford. They've lost only 1 wicket in the opening session. Mike Atherton bowled out for 51. At lunch, England are 149 for 1 with Marcus Trescothick still there on 88.
We get absolutely nowhere.
It's been a memorable few months for England's cricketers, but today they could surpass other achievements. Never before have England scored more than 332 runs in the 4th innings to win a test match. Here they need 370. It was a cautious start by the home side. The manner in which Marcus Trescothick reached his half-century, typical of the tentative approach. But the batsmen were well aware that at this early stage, wicket preservation was crucial. Boundaries were few and far between. It took more than half an hour for Trescothick to hit the first of the day. With a draw enough to win the series for England, they weren't going to take many risks.
First boundary of the morning.
A single was enough to bring Atherton his 50. The opening pair had laid solid foundations, but the smiles on the England balcony were to be short-lived. It was Waqar Younis who made the breakthrough for Pakistan. Atherton out for 51. With England 149 for 1 at lunch, the test could hardly be better poised. James Pearce, BBC News.
And more on the general election. John Sopel is here. John.
Thanks, George, again. Well, as we enter the home straight in this election, the parties have been returning to some of the core issues they believe will win voters over. For Labour, that meant their plans to invest in schools, while the Tories return to their promise of lower taxes. These are all bread and butter issues to the millions of families with young children who make up 30% of Britain's households. So what will win their support? In the third of her special report, Sangeeta Maiska has been talking to one family who are still undecided.
Nestled in the Brecon Beacons is the picturesque Welsh village of Gilwern. It's home to the Evans family.
And how are you having toast today, sunshine?
Geraint and his wife Sue are typical of many parents. They carefully balance the demands of raising the kids, paying the mortgage and covering the bills.
As far as we're concerned, we haven't had much literature at all.
Although Sue and Geraint are closely following the election campaigns, both are undecided voters. They're still unsure which party will prove most family-friendly. And proving family-friendly means making education a priority. All the Evans children go to the local primary school. A pledge of better investment throughout the system would be a vote winner.
I'd like a guarantee of smaller class sizes, an absolute cast-iron guarantee. And I think schools need more resources all round. And we're thinking of the children's future.
Raising standards in education, say the Evans, is the most important issue for the whole family. But both parents also have individual concerns they want addressed. At home, Sue catches up with the housework. She tells me she's given up her full-time teaching job. Paying for childcare was just too expensive.
It just wouldn't be viable for me to be working, running a family, doing all the things that normal families do, and having to pay up for childcare on top.
So for Sue, help getting back to full-time work would also gain her support. A manager at Cardiff Stadium, Geraint's long hours push his income above the national average. He's in a high tax bracket and misses out on some family benefits.
What that means is that things that I believe should be paid for by the government, because we already pay a huge amount of money in tax, we have to pay for on top, which unfortunately means that we don't have an awful lot of spending money.
So the party that sways Geraint must pledge more tax breaks or more family benefits. This, coupled with help for working mums and investment in education, would finally bring the Evans on side.
Sangeeta Maiska there with the Evans family. Well, let's take a look at the first issue they raised in that film, class sizes in schools. Labour says it's almost met its 97 pledge of ensuring no 5 to 7-year-olds are in classes of more than 30. There are no more promises on class sizes this time round. The Tories also make no pledge on class sizes, but they say they'd give head teachers much more freedom. But the Liberal Democrats do want a further cut, promising an average of 25 pupils in primary classes. While the Scottish Nationalists go even further, they'd cut primary classes to 18 or below in Scottish schools.
We want to have good quality public services where the health service delivers on people's expectations, and we give our children the best start in life by going into small class sizes up to a maximum of 18. And we'll get that by having strong SNP voices at Westminster that will deliver the public services and public spending that Scotland requires.
The SNP there. Well, the other issue close to the Evans heart was tax. Labour says its new children's tax credit would be worth £10 a week to families. They also promise a rise in the working families tax credit. The Conservatives say they'd add and extend the children's tax credit by £200 a year for those with children under 5, and they'd reintroduce a version of the married couples allowance for those with children under the age of 11. The Liberal Democrats promised to raise the level at which poorer families start to pay income tax, and they'd increase the benefits paid to families on long-term income support. George.
Well, you promised us a moment of the morning at the top of the programme. Now's your chance, John.
Yes, there was a lot of jittery coverage over the weekend about questions of leadership for William Hague should the Tories go down to defeat on Thursday. And our moment of the morning comes via my colleague John Pienaar, who was at, we heard earlier on in the day, asking a rather difficult question about leadership qualities. And that gives us our moment of the morning.
Question on leadership quality for Mr. Portillo, if I may, because you answered this question yesterday. To what extent will the results of this election for your party, whatever it is, be directly attributable to the leadership quality of William Hague?
Michael Portillo. Well, William has led a really magnificent campaign. And
lots of nervous laughter in the Tory press conference at that particular moment. Just one other thing to mention, George, before we go. I mean, we've talked about the slickness before of Labour's publicity machine. This morning we have Tony Blair appealing to One Nation Conservatives to come over to vote for Labour at this election. By this lunchtime, we have a former Treasury Minister, Anthony Nelson, announcing that he's doing precisely that. It looks very neat, although it is quite a significant scalp for Labour to have got.
John, thank you very much. And News 24 will keep you up to date with the campaign throughout the afternoon. In a moment, the latest from the BBC's news teams across the United Kingdom. But that's all this Monday lunchtime from the 1 o'clock news team. Good afternoon.